Have you ever wondered why you just can't seem to enjoy the things that other people are obsessed with, even though you're really trying? And it's because your brain is most likely wired differently, and it's unique in the way that it operates. Because what might light someone else's brain might do absolutely nothing for you. And what drains another person might be the exact thing that brings you peace and fulfillment. And you might even realize that what made you happy at one moment in life might change as you get older. And really the only way to figure this out is by becoming a bit of a detective in your own life, using your own life experiences as case studies to try and figure out what truly makes you happy. So for me personally, I don't get much satisfaction from hyper-stimulating environments. So pretty much the clubbing party lifestyle. Although I would say I do prefer pre-drinks. For one simple reason, which is the fact that you get to have one-on-one conversations with people, which I found that my brain finds quite stimulating. That said, when you don't enjoy the things that most people seem to love, you may get hit with a sense of what's wrong with me type of pressure, as if you're expected to like certain activities simply because they're considered fun by the majority. Over time, you can start to build up a list of habits, activities, and people that you truly connect with, to the version of you that truly makes you happy. Unfortunately, many people don't take the time to explore this, and instead get stuck in routines that don't actually serve them. So just be intentional about what sort of routine that you're following. Because if you're following some sort of routine that you've copied from another person, like waking up at 5 AM and taking a cold shower, even though deep down you know that your brain doesn't like to be woken up that early, and your body doesn't like being that cold early in the morning. It's also the reason why copying someone else's routine rarely works. You have to experiment, observe, and refine the routine for yourself. And this brings us to a much broader and often misunderstood topic, which I really wanted to talk about, which is mental health. Because we often hear the phrase of people need to talk about their mental health more. And while I do get and respect the intention behind it, I do feel like a lot of this is oversimplified. Because when I hear this exact phrase, I often imagine a scenario where people are expected to pour out the deepest thoughts out to the world. Or even when they're sat in a circle with a bunch of random people. Or even with a therapist that they don't 100% fully trust. And I'm sorry, I don't think you can comfortably talk about these problems in a room where you're pretending. And I would argue that solitude, deep one-to-one conversations, and journaling can be more beneficial in processing what's actually going in your head. And it's not necessarily because other people can't help, because I do believe that there is a time and place for that. But for the majority of the time, you are the person who's actually experiencing what's actually going inside your head. So you may as well understand it yourself. And these videos serve to provide you with more self-awareness and insights on the way that you think. Or they may simply validate what you already realized, but you just never could really put it into words. And it's interesting to note that guys usually process emotions through shared activities and banter, whether that's taking the piss or having a laugh to heighten the morale of the group in a situation which might be quite dark. And this sort of dynamic that I'm talking about has always been a deep-rooted part of masculinity, where this goes as far back as soldiers in the trenches, where they would often use humor as a way to cope with trauma and fear. And for women, they have a slightly different way of expressing their emotions in comparison to men, in the sense that women much rather prefer emotionally supportive conversations, such as venting or quote-unquote spilling the tea, as a way to try and process what they're experiencing. And if we decide to go further back into history, the relationship that people had with mental illness is quite disturbing and so misunderstood. But thankfully, we've come a long way in how we understand emotional expression. And we kind of realize that people have very different ways of expressing it. But saying that, even when an individual is experiencing depression or anxiety, it's very hard for a professional to give you a 100% accurate diagnosis, unlike a broken bone which you can physically see on an x-ray. Because the diagnosis depends on what you as the patient says to the professional. And more often than not, the mental health problems end up becoming misdiagnosed. Not just by professionals, but also by ourselves. Because you've probably had a moment in your life where you've Googled something like, why am I struggling to focus? Or why am I like this? And now all of a sudden you're convinced that you have severe ADHD and you've got some sort of personality disorder. Or you've coughed an unusual amount of times, or you've got that weird spot on your arm. And now Google is convincing you that you've got stage 4 cancer and now you're about to die. Now sure, whatever you've just searched up could actually be real and serious, but more often than not, it's usually misdiagnosed, based on a few searches on Google. And a lot of the times, your brain doesn't actually care if something is real. It cares more about if it actually feels that it's real. And it's the reason why that your body can actually panic in imaginary scenarios. And it can actually affect your overall well-being and quality of life. And also by that train of thought, you can also train it to become more anxious, paranoid, or even emotionally numb, just based on the inputs that you feed it. Like the type of content that you watch, or the way that you talk to yourself, or even the way that your environment is at the moment. Personally, I've become very conscious of my habit of listening to music. It's the one addiction I'm really trying to beat, because I can literally feel it clouding my ability to think, especially when I'm writing or making these videos. And that also goes for carbs, by the way. And for one reason or another, my mind becomes a lot sharper when I'm walking, even if it's just walking aimlessly in my room. And I've actually decided to do a lot more research into this, and I've realized that a lot of the great thinkers and philosophers actually used to do this to declutter their brain and actually think a lot more clearly. Even with something like video games, which was something that I was hooked on when I was younger. I was just obsessed with playing games, more so because of the strategy and the mechanics behind it. And this is really how I approach real life nowadays. Almost like I can level up certain skills in real life. So these are some things which I've realized with my own brain chemistry. But obviously your brain is unique to mine, and so is everyone else's. I appreciate you watching the video, and if you're still interested, you can check out one of the videos that are popping up on screen right now.